It's good to be back with you for another day as we are continuing on through our Advent series in the Jesse tree. And today is day 15, which means that we are now 10 days away from the big day, the end of Advent and the arrival of Christmas, as best represented in a manger in a little town of Bethlehem. We still have a ways to go, though, and if you'd like to join us on the journey, that URL right there, go.christtable.today/Jesse Tree, is going to give you all of the information that you need in order to be a part of this. It also will tell you how you can get one of these, which is a bag of 25 ornaments that go along with each and every day to help you remember them, teach them to children, or just to put on your Christmas tree as a reminder of this journey to Advent. It also comes with this foundational study, this devotional that's very simple to utilize. It has a few questions in it every day. It has a short write-up. It has a key verse and then a little longer reading for each and every day, and you can utilize it in any way that makes sense for you in your journey through Advent. Now, if you'd like to find out more about Christ Table, the ministry that brings this to you, then you can go right there to www.christtable.today. Sign up for our email list there. Consider making a donation or becoming one of our regular donors, and you'll get all of these resources physically sent to you in the mail every couple of months. In fact, we're working on the next one. That'll be in homes real soon. Just after the first of the year. So why don't we go ahead and jump into our text for today. We're going to be in Daniel chapter 6. Now, we won't handle all of the chapter of Daniel 6 today. It's a little longer than we have time for, but I actually want to encourage you to read this, because one of the things about a lot of these stories as we get into them, especially the Old Testament stories, is we might remember them from Sunday school or from church if you've been in church for any length of time. Or you may just know them. The story of Daniel and the lion's den it's a story that most of us know, even if we didn't grow up in religious context. But like I said, even if you did, some of these stories, whenever you actually go back and read them as an adult, it's like all of these details jump off the page. It oftentimes is told in a way that you didn't know all of that was there. This is one of those stories. And so I want to encourage you, if you have the time, to go ahead and read all of Daniel chapter 6. And so it's good to see people sign on this morning. I love to see those questions come up, those good mornings come up. And so I see them live whenever they're here. So Daniel chapter 6 is where we're going to be. And I've already kind of blown the cover of what the story is about today. And so the ornament is this lion, and the story centers around lions. But in our devotional today, I'm actually not going to make it to the lions. I want to start at the very beginning of the story and set up the lions. And then you can go on back to Daniel chapter 6 and read the rest of the chapter on your own. So the Israelites, Daniel included, find themselves in captivity. So this is a captivity story, and it is a story that is really absolutely incredible, because the Israelites and the way that they live, they find actually great favor, and even, if I can say, affection from their captors. And so that's going to be foundational to this story, is that Daniel ends up catching the attention in a positive way of those who were at one point his enemies. Darius the Mede, who is the king, decided to divide the kingdom into 120 provinces, and he appointed a high officer to rule over each province. So, very simple. Leadership strategy, going to delegate, going to bring people into leadership to help lead better, more efficiently. So 120 leaders over 120 different parcels of land, provinces. So the king also chose Daniel and 2 other as administrators to supervise the high officers and protect the king's interests. So, middle management. over top of these 120 high officers over the provinces, he appoints Daniel and two others. So an executive team over those 120 in between he and those individuals. Why? To supervise them, because 120 people is still way too many individuals to supervise, right? So he's supervising 3 people. Those 3 people are supervising 120 people. It works out well, and it also helps to protect the king's interests. So you can imagine these were very trusted individuals. No one makes it to this level in a kingdom without being a person who has proven themselves to be utmost loyal to the king. Now, the difficulty is you know how this is. Like this happens in school with teachers and tuck-ups. This happens with adults who never grew out of that in the workplace, right? This happens in churches where individuals will prove their loyalty, will suck up, will rise to a high position because they have proven themselves worthy and loyal. But it's a game. They are only loyal to themselves, and they have deceived the person in power into thinking that they have the person in power's best interest at heart, but they don't. They have their best interest at heart. This is so normal as to be expected of almost everyone. And so whenever someone does not act in that way, does not act in a selfish, but acts in a selfless way, it is unusual as to go so far as to say to be the exception. Daniel, though, even out of those 120 and even out of those 3, proved himself more capable than all of the other administrators and high officers. So Daniel stood head and shoulders above them. And whenever you stand out like that, you're not going to be liked, because not only are you standing out, but you're also standing in the way. Your shadow takes away the light from other people who really aren't selfless, but are selfish and want to be living in the light. And so that's what's happening here to Daniel. Because of Daniel's great ability, the king made plans to place him over the entire empire. So it seems as though everybody knew that Daniel's star was on the rise, and not only was he going to be a part of this executive team of 3 over the 120, but Daniel is also now going to be vice president. He's going to be chair of the board to the king's CEO. He's gonna be the king for all intents and purposes. And the other administrators and high officers began searching for some fault in the way Daniel was handling government affairs, but they couldn't find anything to criticize or condemn. So Daniel has 120 high officers dragging through his social media, combing up anything they can as a PI in order to try to find something to take him out of the knees. The high officers who were next to him on that executive team, the administrators, the other 2, they were trying to find something to take him down, to find some fault, but they couldn't find anything to criticize or condemn him. Why did they want to do this? Well, this happens, right? To anybody who is placed on a pedestal. All those underneath want to take that person down, king of the mountain. I also think that this had a lot to do probably with ethnic racism. Daniel was an outsider. He was not one of them. And so I think that doubly added to the difficulty here for these people. But Daniel, the text tells us, was faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy. How did he rise to that level as an outsider? Well, because of those 3 things, right? I mean, leaders know almost without fail, leaders are able to tell the difference between someone who is selfless and selfish. And so with those people who you assume would take you out given the chance, you keep them at arm's distance. But for those people who you feel can be trusted, you give them the keys to the kingdom. Oftentimes, leaders will be duped into giving the keys to the kingdom to somebody who wasn't worthy of that. But the text tells us that Daniel was worthy, completely trustworthy. When you live in this way, you are always going to draw the deep ire of others. It doesn't matter whether you are in Daniel's position casting a long shadow. You could have been among those 120 people way down the organizational chart, or not even listed on the organizational chart. Could have been a secretary, could have been a janitor, could have been an absolute nobody in the eyes of middle management. But when you live in this way, when you are, what did the text say, faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy no matter the call, you're going to draw the deep ire of others as much or more as you're going to draw the attention and the blessing of others. I guarantee Daniel started at the bottom, wherever the bottom was, and it was probably a lot lower than administrative assistant, probably a lot lower than assistant to the administrative assistant, probably a lot lower than assistant to the assistant janitor, right? Daniel started at the bottom, but he lived in a certain way, and he both drew the blessing and the curse. You see, oftentimes we only pay attention to those who push back, to those who try to rattle our cage, to those who curse us, and we forget, ignore, or don't allow the blessings to land because of the way we've lived, because of living well. But don't be surprised. Don't be surprised whenever you live like Daniel, whenever you receive pushback. It's not because you're living wrongly, it's because you're living rightly. So these individuals conclude, after finding nothing, our only chance of finding grounds for accusing Daniel will be in connection with the rules of his religion. It's a story as old as time. To somebody of faithfulness, to faith, this is the Achilles heel. This is the chink in the armor. This is the way for us to catch 22, to get them. So the administrators and the high officers went to the king and said, I love buttering them up, right? Long live King Darius. We are all in agreement, we administrators, officials, high officers, advisors, and governors, hundreds of us, that the king should make a law that will be strictly enforced. Give orders that for the next 30 days, any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, will be thrown into the den of lions. And now, your majesty, issue and sign this law so it cannot be changed. Do it quickly, an official law of the Medes and the Persians that cannot be revoked. So yeah, here it is. Here's the ink. We've already actually started the signature. All you need to do is just put your hand on the pen and just make. So King Darius signed the law. I doubt Daniel was in the room. He trusted those who should not have been trusted, and made a decision which we will see in your reading later on today that he regrets. But for Daniel, the living out of your faith will carry a cost, because Daniel is completely trustworthy and is faithful, not just to the king, but to his King of Kings. And the living out of Daniel's faith will carry a cost, and it will for you too. You don't have to be vice president of a great country. You don't have to be an administrator or a governor. Whether you're at school, at work, at home, in the neighborhood, the living out of your faith will carry a cost. Now, oftentimes, I think we mix up what the price paid, what the cost is for those things. We cry suffering whenever there is no true suffering. We're just being an ass. If that's what's going on, you're just reaping the reward for how you acted, for how you behaved, for how you treated others. That's not carrying the cost of your faith. That's That's making your faith carry the cost of your idiocy. Don't behave badly and then say it's because of your faith. But whenever you behave well, like the Good Samaritan, whenever you live with Christ-likeness, whenever you bless other people and you live a way in the world that gives grace and mercy and justice, there's going to be a cost. And it's surprising where that cost may come, because oftentimes religious people say that that cost comes from the world. I don't find that to be true, because if you read closely those verses that we just came through, they set up a religious rule that any prayers should be made to Darius. So this is not a story of religion and faith against the world and culture. This is religion and faith fighting religion and faith. These are religious people. Darius, the high officers, the administrators, the governors. And so don't be surprised, don't be shocked whenever the cost of living out your faith comes from the religious people around you. When the price that you pay for being trustworthy, for being Christ-like, for following the commands of the Beatitudes, for following Micah 6:8, living humbly, walking justly, seeking mercy. Don't be surprised whenever it's not the world, the non-believers, those who are far from God, who are making you pay a price. It's going to be the religious people. Maybe the people in your congregation. It may be the people who have been spiritual guides or mentors to you in the past. But it will come from within the boundaries of your faith community more often than it will not. And that is part of the deal here with Daniel. They have a way to practice their faith. He has a way to practice his faith. And they're going to use it to try to destroy him. But it's all faith-based. So when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down as usual in his upstairs room with his windows open towards Jerusalem, which was his practice. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to his God. Then the officials went together to Daniel's house and found him praying and asking God for help. And so now the conflict is about to erupt. Their plan has worked beautifully, knowing that he was a person of faith and that he was a person of consistency. Well, I'm going to let you read the rest of the soap opera as it unfolds. And it has several twists and turns that if you haven't read this story in a long time, or only have heard it told in Sunday school or in church, you're going to be in for some interesting surprises along the way as you read through this. But I want to stop here, because what we see here with Daniel is we see a consistency in prayer and in the pattern of his spiritual rhythms that, if we look closely, we actually see throughout many individuals in the Old Testament. David, we see this in the way he writes about prayer in the Psalms. We see this in the disciples and in Jesus, in their prayer rhythms. We see this in the early church in the New Testament in their prayer rhythms, but we aren't usually looking for it, so we glance right by it. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done. He had a rhythm, a specific rhythm of prayer, where he prayed intentionally at very intentional times. And that is the thing that oftentimes I think that we lose. For us, prayer is something that is irregular at best, or as needed. And Daniel in the Old Testament and the New Testament really encourages us to have specific times where we just pray, where we get into that rhythm. And that's where we're going to end today. So I want to encourage you to model your life after Daniel in committing to a regular rhythm of prayer. Maybe that rhythm is tied in with meals. Maybe that rhythm is tied in with work or with school or with travel to or from someplace. Maybe it's at rising. Maybe it's at going to bed, or maybe there are specific times of day where no matter what you're doing, no matter where you are, an alarm goes off on your phone and you stop for a moment and pray. I don't believe that there is any reason to be dogmatic about requiring a specific number of times or a specific place in your day in which you pray. All that I wish you to consider is the power of Daniel's model in committing to some regular rhythm of prayer. And if that isn't a part of your spiritual journey at the moment, don't be too aggressive. Just once a day. Once a day, where would be a time where I could devote 30 seconds and then go from there? Until tomorrow.